So today I am going to talk about demands. What are demands and what do they feel like to a PDAer? So I'm an adult PDAer and I'm a parent of little PDAers, and you know, what can be perceived by my children's brains as demands will often be different to what my brain perceives as demands. But I think initially when families or professionals start learning about PDA, pathological demand avoidance, and they hear the word demand, often the understanding is that a demand must be someone enforcing a rule. So it must be somebody going, you go and clean your room now. And of course that is a demand, but it's so much more than this. Because if our children responded to that type of demand in the way they do, they'd be pretty close to typical. I mean, a lot of children, a lot of people don't like to be spoken to like that. So when we talk about demands for PDAers, we've really got to expand. We've got to really open our mind up to all of the possibilities. So if we're thinking about a person as a foundation who is very, very sensitive, having that hypersensitive neuroception, which means that our brain is constantly scanning for threat, and we are more often than not in a hypervigilant fight, flight, freeze or fawn state, even though it doesn't look like it, and it often won't look like it, because a lot of us are very, I speak for myself and my children and my friends, family who are PDAers, quite cocky. We might come across as really confident. We might have a really cheeky, mischievous sense of humour. We might engage in a lot of back chat. We might have no problem standing up for ourselves. But don't be fooled by outside appearances. All of those are often threat responses. So we don't have a lot of control over those. So when we think about that person who is a PDAer being in that hypervigilant state, demands are not just people asking us to do things. They're not just somebody giving us recommendations or suggestions. It's not just that. It goes so far beyond that, and it will be different for every person, and there will be similarities and differences. But, you know, for me, sometimes it's expectations like social and cultural norms. So many PDA children will struggle with celebrating birthdays because there is this unspoken social, cultural expectation that we will enjoy that birthday, and we will enjoy the fact that people give us gifts, and we will be grateful and thankful. And, you know, sometimes I think in many families, the notion of having a birthday party, it's a wonderful thing if that's what the child wants, but sometimes it's also a bit of conditioning for adults. We feel guilty if we don't throw a birthday party for our children. We feel negligent almost if we aren't, you know, falling all over our child on their birthday and making everything about them. So it can be a real internal battle to be able to accommodate our child's needs and let go of our own conditioning. It's a really, really hard one, but a lot of PDA children and adults will have a lot of chronic anxiety leading up to their birthday because they know that there are some expectations around that. And those expectations, you know, if we really get down to it, there are a lot of expectations around how the child will respond, how they'll respond to receiving gifts. They'll have to say please and thank you, and they might have to pretend they like gifts when they don't. So there's a lot of masking involved. And yes, societally we are conditioned to see that as a sign of respect and to use our manners and to be nice and kind. But those things right there are also demands for PDAers. So not just our own birthdays, but it can be any kind of holidays, Christmas, Easter, just absolutely anything, somebody else's birthday. Now, for me personally, being a parent of 4 children, and those 4 children don't celebrate their birthdays in a huge way. We've always just had a very small family party, and that's all they want. We get some balloons, some cake, some stuff to eat, we pop some music on, we sit around the table, we have some laughs, and we have a really good time. But for me, during those times, even though that doesn't sound like it's hard for me to do as a parent to organise a family party, it's not hard, but I have anxiety. I experience anxiety as an adult PDAer, knowing that everybody's coming together, even though it's just myself and my children and their father. Everybody's coming together. We're going to have a good time. So there's an expectation right there. We're going to have a good time. We're going to smile and laugh and eat cake. And most people would be fine with that and really looking forward to it. But it sets off my PDA anxiety because there are expectations there. What if I fail? What if I get it wrong? And it's really hard to sit around at the table. I often shut down. Everybody will be laughing and having a great time, and I shut down, and that's my PDA. So taking my experience and then thinking about our children and how they feel in those situations is really important. There will also be children who absolutely love celebrating their birthday. There will also be children who love celebrating their birthday and then all of a sudden don't want to talk about it anymore, don't want to know about it. I'm just going to jump into the comments. We shame them when they don't want to celebrate other family members' birthdays. Yeah, we do. I mean, we're conditioned to shame our children into compliance, aren't we? And I think just inside of that, it's not because we're bad people. It's because we fear for our children's futures and how they'll be received and how they'll get on in the world, because we've been conditioned to believe those things are important and we must put in all the hard work and mold and shape our children now or they won't survive, and it's sad because we're being trained to completely overlook and miss out on who our children are now because we're always projecting into the future, always, always, always. And then we get to the teen years and we project into adulthood. We're always taught that there must be some fear factor around raising our children. Will they have friends? Are they eating okay? Do they shower often? Are their clothes okay? Are they academically doing well? Will they get a job when they leave school? Oh, you're 16 now, you should know exactly what you want to do for the rest of your life. It is wild. It's wild. And we wonder why so many children are anxious today. I've had severe burnout recently, so my work has been reduced. The person was trying to care for my needs by reducing perceived demands, but I lost all choice. And because I lost the choice to say no, I felt huge anxiety and rejection sensitive dysphoria because of it. Not having the perceived demands was a demand on my autonomy. Yeah, that's interesting too, how that works. I relate. I've always hated my own birthday, and this is the first time I've heard someone else get it. Birthdays are hard. They are hard. I get excited, but then my brain very quickly does a backflip and goes, oh, talking to people, being grateful. It feels like you give up what's supposed to be a celebration of your life. Even for one day, you have to give it up to please others. That's how I felt as a child. It's not that I was ungrateful. I would have birthday parties and things like that. But the whole day was about, I think, it was quite performative. Like, look, we're doing the thing. Here we are, we're doing the thing that parents do. We're making our children look like they're special on their birthday, and we're throwing a party. Child's probably suffering inside. But yeah, a lot of demands. I want to talk a little bit about gratitude. and using manners, because I know that a lot of people would hear this and think, but isn't it really important for us to teach our children the value of gratitude and respect and manners? And absolutely it is. Absolutely. However, the way that I understand gratitude, respect, and manners and those things may be quite different to most people. I think that even the things that we are expected to be grateful for have been conditioned and ripped apart. And a couple of examples here. Parenting. A lot of us growing up may relate to the fact that if we had things done for us, we were expected to be uber grateful. And there was an expectation that we would earn the things that we have, or that we would in return express extreme gratitude to our parents or other people. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think for a PDAer, when we break that down, you may hear a lot of PDA children say things like, I didn't ask to be born. I didn't want to be born. Why did you have me? Because even our autonomy around our own existence is something that comes to mind for us when we're very, very young, and we can feel quite resentful about it, especially if we're not having a good time in life. Why did you have me, Mum? Why? I didn't want to be here. Now, if you take a child that already thinks like that and then place those expectations on them, like the whole, you need to eat all of your dinner, think about all the other children in the world that don't have dinner, things like that. That's not teaching a child to be grateful. That's teaching a child about manipulation and dishonesty and lack of transparency. And the PDAer, the things that mean the most to us are relationships based on authenticity, honesty, transparency, and without agenda and motivation. We sniff that stuff out straight away. PDA children sniff that stuff out straight away, can see straight through people and the things they say and do. Demands can be something as simple as saying, dinner's ready, come and eat your dinner. And I know that I talk a lot about PDA-friendly language, and a lot of people in the advocacy space and education space around PDA, we talk about ways of reframing language so that it doesn't come across as demanding. But that's not a solution. Often people will take that information and use it to try and disguise demands, which is, again, manipulative, it's dishonest, and it's not transparent. So sometimes even with a reframe of language, the PDAer will respond the same because it's still a demand. A demand is a demand is a demand. So if I say to my child, dinner's here, come and eat it, that's a demand. If I say to my child, I wonder if you're feeling hungry, it's still going to be a demand because they're switched on and they know that what I'm saying is, I really want you to come and eat your dinner. Now, I can give you an example. I have an 8-year-old who loves food, loves all kinds of food. And the way we do things, yeah, Danny, better off saying, I have a demand for you. Yeah, actually we say things like that in our house because it's honest, right? It's totally honest and transparent. So my child, I never ever say, what do you want for breakfast? What do you feel like for breakfast? What do you want for dinner? What should we have for dinner? I wonder what we might have for dinner. Now that may work sometimes, but we've worked out our own way in our family. I just cook the thing and put it on the table. Sometimes I don't even say anything, and I allow my child the space, the freedom, and the autonomy to make their way out when they're ready and say, "Mom, I'm hungry," or "Mom, can you please get me something to eat?" And I will say, "Over there, kiddo, already done." If I were to say, "I'm making your favorite food," that's a demand. "Are you hungry?" Demand. "How's your tummy feeling? Is it rumbling?" Demand. So even when we change our language, those things can still be demands. And I know that a lot of families come into the PDA space looking for solutions or one-liners or approaches, parenting approaches for their children. But it's so important to remember that we are all so different. What one child responds to really well, another child may not respond to well at all. Yeah, I'm just going to go into the comments and catch up. I'm sorry if I don't read everyone's comments out. Sometimes there's a lot coming in and it's hard for me to keep up. If we allow them to avoid demands, how will they manage in adulthood? I've had to manage. My son will too. Yeah, that's one of my, it's right up there with one of the top 10 most asked questions. And what I like to say to people is, PDA is a disability. So imagine a child who's a wheelchair user, and imagine saying, if we allow them to use their wheelchair, how will they ever walk in adulthood? Or if we don't encourage them to keep trying to walk, how are they going to survive the real world? I think people are so quick to dismiss very real disability when a person's outer experience or outer expression is like this. People wouldn't have a clue that sometimes I can be in a pretty standard regular conversation with somebody and then a big demand will come about and I will literally freeze or go into shutdown. I won't be able to speak. Or I'll have to say to that person, "I'm shutting down. I need to hang up now." I mean, it's a disability. It just blows me away when people say this with any kind of, even with ADHD, autism, non-PDA autism. I think it's just really ignorant, isn't it? Family members would often label me as spoiled. Yeah, I got that a lot. I got ungrateful, pathological liar. And I think a lot of that comes down to genuinely not understanding what's going on and masking to survive, trying to appear as though I know what's going on when I don't. Even now as an adult, there's so much of my life that I pretend I know what's going on and I don't. I really don't. It's hard to feel safe enough to know that you don't have to pretend anymore when you've been doing it your whole life. The best way to get my kids to eat is to try and eat myself. Yeah. Oh, my kids always want whatever I'm eating too, so that's a good one. It seems to help if the food smells good as it cooks and lures them away from iPad land without saying anything. Yeah, my children eat and use their iPads if they want to, because sometimes the threat of not having the iPad will prevent them from being able to do anything. And that's a whole other topic, but that's another tricky one. Just been trying to get my child to eat lunch. Yeah, it can be tricky. I find the more we let go, and the scarier it is for us, the more we let go, the more space we leave for our children, the more autonomy, and the more they work it out. Of course, that's not always going to be the case. I think this is the tricky part about PDA, is that it is so complex, and the way that we talk about parenting is quite radical. And the hardest part about shifting to that paradigm is having to do the work on ourselves. It's very seldom about our children. It's usually about us challenging what exists within, our own fears and our own traumas and our own beliefs and values and our own conditioning, and really looking at why we're afraid and why we believe the things we do. And that's really hard. But how do we explain the disability to others who just call our son angry or impatient? Well, he may be angry and impatient because he has a heightened threat response. He has a hypervigilant threat response. So the part of the brain, the amygdala, that is scanning for threat is largely consistently active in a PDAer. So we talk about the neurobiology. Things have changed in our house. My son had complained he didn't want to be made to eat at the same times I wanted. I had originally asked him what time would he like to eat, which was met with total disgust. I then tried some suggestions and left his meals in the fridge and left it up to him to choose with no pressure to join us for dinner. He then from that day wanted to have dinner with us. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting too, sometimes we try and make plans with our children and we try and involve them in our decision making, but those are demands as well. So sometimes, we might make plans with our children. It's like people getting their PDAers to promise me that if I let you play with those blocks, you will clean them up later. And the child will say, I promise, I promise. We have a saying in our home, and it's PDAers don't make promises. We don't. Because in the moment, we will say, yes, I promise I'll do this thing, and we'll really, really mean it. But then later, we won't be able to do that thing. And it's not that we're going back on our promise, it's that we have a disability and it's a demand and we literally can't do it. So sometimes when we make plans with our children and involve them in the decision-making process, they will agree to things because in the moment they want to and they really mean it and they really believe this might be the answer. But we're all just whistling in the dark most of the time, because we'll get to that plan later on and it will fall through. And as parents, we'll become frustrated and we might say, you agreed to this. We sat down and we talked about this together. Why aren't you following along? And the child probably won't know why. When we're children, unless we're being raised by neurodivergent people who have a really good understanding about their own neurodivergence and they're educating their children and teaching them self-advocacy, unless they have that, a child with PDA or a PDAer doesn't have a really good understanding of how their brain and their thought patterns, their cognition, their processing works. So when we ask them to engage in conversations with us about why they won't do the thing, they wouldn't have a clue why. They don't know why. So they engage in a conversation with us and they might say all sorts of things. But all of those are ways of avoiding demands or people pleasing or fawning or keeping us happy. It's a terrible thing to be a PDAer and to be young and to know you are likely going to be in trouble most of the time because you can't do the thing then you promise to do the thing and you still can't do the thing. And your family goes to a lot of trouble to accommodate you doing the thing and you still can't do the thing. But I would put it to everybody that if this is the case, the people not learning here is us. If our children are struggling with the same thing over and over and over and over and over and it's not changing, and we're still having the same expectation over and over and over and over and over and over and it's not changing, we're not learning. And it's really, really hard. I get that. It's really, really hard when we think we've tried everything we know. But honestly, the best thing we can do, if we have tried everything we think we know to do with our children and it's not working, or it's creating more tension, or it's disconnecting us further from our child and disempowering us and causing stress, then we do nothing. We just do nothing. Because in that nothing, sometimes is where we'll find peace. Often if I don't know what to do, I just get on with my day and I do my own thing. I just do. I find something to do and I stop worrying about things. But I know that that can be really hard. Hi, Jenna. Hi, Penny. Hey, Sarah. I think that's great, Michelle. If he will eat anything wrapped in bread because it changes the texture, I think that's fine. Yeah, they bring the iPad with them to the food area and then dance as they eat. No sitting at the table here. Yeah, that sounds like my house. I have had ongoing battles with clothing. He wears the same clothes every day, a soccer t-shirt and shorts, and trying to encourage him to try new clothes. Long pants, warm tops has been impossible. So frustrating, but I persist. Any ideas welcomed? Yes, stop persisting and allow it to not be a battle anymore. It sounds really hard, Melissa. It sounds like it's causing you a lot of stress and tension, and it's probably really stressful for him. Wearing the same thing over and over is really, really normal for autistic folks, and it's really okay. I would suggest throwing the same outfit in the washer and dryer every night so they're ready the next day, and just letting it go. And I know sometimes our children are wearing summer clothes in the winter. Yeah, that's hard. I know. I had to let my youngest do that. My family had to let me do that. I remember my grandmother, every time she would see me in the winter, I'd be wearing a thin, long sleeve shirt, but really thin, because I had to be cool. I was, a teenager. And she would say to me every single time, "You are going to catch pneumonia." And I'd be like, "No, I'm not. No." And then one day I did. And I started dressing warm after that. But honestly, there are just so many battles we don't need to have with our children. I think I like to break it down. I ask myself, how important is this? What's the worst thing that can happen? Is this about my fears? Is there something that I can work on within myself? Because it's okay for him to wear the same clothes every day. It really is, I promise you. And I know it's hard. It's hard for us. But you might find that if you step back and allow him to wear that same outfit every day, he might change his mind and start trying other things. If he's a PDAer, it's more than likely really safe and comforting for him, and if he's not a PDAer, to wear those things every day. They're serving a purpose. So if there's a fight for something with our children, it's because it's serving a purpose, and usually it's a sense of safety. Future plans are always a nope, aren't they? Yeah. We do most things spontaneously. Like I will get the feeling that my PDA is going to let me go for a drive, and I'll say, hey, who wants to go for a drive? And we'll go. But I never say, okay, tomorrow let's do this. I used to do that. And then I'd always find myself trying to get out of it. And that's the anxiety. Sometimes not even recognizing that there's anxiety around it. Thank you. This makes me feel so much better about my natural parenting. I can't deal with the demands of morning routine, so I now let everything go as slow as I can. We all have iPad gaming breaks. They can eat at the couch. Are demands harder when you're just waking up? Oh, yes. I've observed my daughter finds it very hard. Yeah, I barely speak to my children when we first get up. I say good morning, give them a big hug, and off I go and just look after myself. Sometimes when PDAers wake up, we can be hit with anxiety about what the day is going to bring. And we're processing from the moment we wake up, before our eyes even open. So I get really, really, really anxious and upset if I have a lot of demands put on me before a coffee. And I make sure I get up at about 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock. So I've got 2 or 3 hours just to myself, quiet, coffee, writing, doing whatever the heck I want. So then I've had time without demands. Our kids don't often get that. As soon as they wake up, there's the whole morning routine. Time to get dressed, time to eat breakfast, time to brush your hair, time to have a shower, all of that stuff. Bam, 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 demand. And a lot of kids really don't cope with it. So yes, I think you're doing great by taking the morning slowly. That's really wonderful. I love hearing your kids eat with an iPad. Same with my son. I grew up with such conditioning to feel shame about such things. I feel a lot of weight off my shoulders to let that conditioning go. There's so many things that we've been conditioned around. So many things. And look, people often come onto my page and comment in the comment section, still riddled with all of those thoughts and feelings. And I know that it's just a projection of their own experience and fear. But I think about it like this. When I'm on my deathbed, when I'm in my last moments, what will I care most about? The type of person I was and how I showed up in the world and the love I gave to my children? Or will I be laying there saying, oh my God, I let my kids eat with their iPad. Holy crap, what a horrible parent, what a negligent parent I was. I mean, it is okay for our kids to eat with their iPads. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there about technology, and that also is another topic, but you've only got to do a Google search of when television first came out. And all of the articles and the concerns and the research and the things people were saying about children's exposure to television and eating in front of the television, it was all the same thing. Yet we think that iPads and technology is this whole new thing and rotting our children's brains. It's just history repeating itself. It really is. Penny, I was about to do the vacuuming when I saw Kristy was live. Great way to procrastinate doing the task I hate. Oh, Penny, I know you hate doing the vacuuming. You're still pushing on. Ah, oh, you're a champion, honestly. My son has a very strong ADHD brain as well as being an autistic PDAer. Oh, I have that in common with him. Accepting support for his executive functioning has always been difficult, as executive functioning supports are heavy demands. But then without that support, feelings of uncertainty make him very anxious. That is really hard, Lila, and I relate. I also think that it's really important to ascertain or discern between executive functioning challenges and demand avoidance, because there is a lot of overlap, and sometimes when we seek support for executive functioning challenges, it may be demand avoidance. People often assume that when a PDAer is avoiding demands, it's conscious, that we're going, oh, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to come up with an excuse not to do it. Rather, what happens is I want to do something and I just can't make myself do it. It's as though there's a dead weight. And the brain is very, very clever in how it prevents us from engaging with demands. So I can be fatigued, get a migraine, all sorts of things. Even having supports in place for executive functioning might mean that I'm still having challenges with executive functioning because I might be avoiding demands. Struggling to find a balance with allowing my PDA 20-year-old his autonomy and making his world as demandless as possible, but in doing so, it is creating the opposite effect for me. I'm getting lost in the mix. So what I'm understanding from that is that you're taking on a lot of responsibility for him and putting a lot of demands on yourself. That's really tricky too. It is tricky. I think it helps me to remember that my child is disabled, that PDA is a disability, and if my child had a more obvious outward expression of disability, would I feel the same? I'd probably still feel really exhausted. I would definitely have a lot more responsibility and pressure, but I'm not sure I'd be looking for a balance, because when I hear you say struggling to find a balance with allowing my PDA 20-year-old his autonomy, if we flip it for a minute and think about if he had a physical disability, an obvious physical disability, and you can choose any one that you like, we may not see it the same way. We may not say, I'm struggling to find a balance with allowing my 20-year-old with cerebral palsy, for example, his autonomy and making his world as accommodating as possible. In doing so, it's creating the opposite effect for me. So I guess my question there would be, how can we support ourselves? How can I offer myself more support? Can I access supports for me? Sometimes we put a lot of focus on accessing supports for our children when we too need a lot of support. So if he doesn't want to practice reading, take a bath, get a haircut, get dressed, just let it go. Yes, absolutely. And I know it's shocking to hear someone say that, but yes, if it were me, yes. There are mornings where my children get up and they'll still be in their pajamas at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I will say, so are we going to get dressed today? And they'll say, no, I don't want to. And I know that if I push the issue, the anxiety they experience will escalate and all hell will break loose. If we're just going to be at home and it doesn't matter, I just let it go. I let as much go as possible because it results in peace for the entire family. It's not about being a negligent parent. It's quite the opposite. So, I think too, remembering that whilst our children may not be able to do this thing right now, that doesn't mean it's forever. And when our children are PDAers, the more we can let things go, the more their anxiety is able to de-escalate and that threat response unlocks and they're able to feel more safety. And then the part of their brain that needs to function correctly for them to take risk and make choices and challenge themselves can actually operate. When a child's in a state of escalated anxiety, those parts of their brain cannot function. So this is why it makes perfect sense to let go, let go, let go, let go of all the things that don't really matter in order to create a sense of safety for our children, because they can't push themselves, they can't challenge themselves, they can't get out of their comfort zone when they're already highly anxious. Oh, so does mine, Natasha. My 8-year-old, every morning, what are we doing today? You feel scared to answer. Yeah, I understand. Mine's usually asking because they want to spend time with me and they want these extravagant plans. And so I just say things like, well, I thought I'd grab a rocket. I hired a rocket. It'll be out the back in about, I don't know, 10 minutes, and we're going to fly to Mars. Thought we'd have a bit of cheese from the moon, and then we'll jet across to Uranus, and then we have a bit of a laugh about that, of course, because it's Uranus. I just get really silly with it because it diffuses sometimes. Oh, Sarah, that's a great idea. Yes. For the mum who was asking about wearing the same outfit, Sarah says we buy multiples of things we can wear. Same. You will never, ever, ever see me not wearing a black singlet under everything I wear. I literally wear a black singlet every single day of my life. Every single day of my life. I sleep in a black singlet and I wear a black singlet under every outfit. Every outfit. Even if it's a t-shirt and tracksuit pants around the house, black singlet underneath. It's just comforting. It's comforting, and I don't feel like myself without it. So I have, I don't even know how many black singlets, but I know they're always available to me. Yeah, Sarah, that's a part of the demand avoidance too, I think. And this is a really classic example of our children not having the skills to understand how their brain's working. When they wake up in the morning and say, what are we doing today? Wanting us to engage with them. And then we give them answers and they don't like any of it. That's because those answers are demands. That's why I just say silly things. I wonder, Melissa, I mean, you've probably already tried this. I'm going to bet you've already tried this. Just packing additional clothes in the car and saying nothing and going to the snow. If he wants to go to the snow, that is. Going to the snow in his soccer shorts and t-shirt. I know it sounds really out there, but just letting him get in the car like that and then getting there, he'll see how cold it is, and then you can say, hey, brought these along. Who's the superhero now? Alison, I haven't washed any of my son's clothes for over 3 months. It's been about that long since he showered too. I hear you. That's really hard. It's hard for us as mums, I think. And it's also okay. It is okay. You know, I've had connections with lots of families whose children have gone months without bathing, and then one day they just do. And I think the months that we put in letting it go helps to build that sense of safety. We're taking away the pressure. It is very, very hard though, and I think you're just amazing for hanging in there. It's interesting, the idea of spontaneity as a solution. I find my child really struggles. Oh, I forgot I can do this. Ah, I forgot I can do that. And I've got sound effects. Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting, the idea of spontaneity as a solution. I find my child really struggles with transitions, so I need to give warning of plans. But she's also demand avoidant. Not sure if PDA, but definitely fits a lot of this. How do we balance transitions but also demand avoidance? The transitions are really, really hard. Sometimes struggles with transitions can be also confused with demand avoidance. So my question would be, what are we transitioning to? Is it something that is a demand? Is this around school? Or is it around an environment that is very challenging for your little person? And transitions are horrible because we're not, autistic people, we're not wired to be multitasking. We're not wired to do 10 minutes of this and then 5 minutes of that. And school was painful for me because the amount of time it would take for me to be able to start focusing on this topic would be the same amount of time that the whole lesson went for. And then we'd be told, okay, it's time to go to the next lesson. I felt like someone was ripping my arms off. You know, like we're monotropic. We have this monotropic focus. I need to be able to sit down and focus on the one thing for as long as I need to process the information, to make sense of the information, to whiz it all around up here and rip it apart and put it back together and understand it. That's how the autistic brain works. So transitioning can be really, really hard because everything we do, we need that additional time for processing the information and making sense and consolidating knowledge. So that is really hard. So that it's tricky when I hear people say, how do we balance transitions or how do we manage transitions? Because my honest answer wants to be, well, how do you manage a neurotypical person thinking too quickly? If I was an autistic parent of a neurotypical child and I asked neurotypical people, how do I stop my child from thinking so quickly and then just moving on? Because that's foreign to me, that's bizarre. So I don't think there's anything about it that is wrong or needs to be fixed, but I do understand that when a child is at school or when we're moving from one activity to the next at home or needing to be somewhere, then that's a different thing. But I would say with transitions, sometimes giving warnings heightens the anxiety of a PDAer. So when we're talking about PDAers and transitions, I would recommend not using timers, not using visual schedules, and not giving warnings. And I know that sounds really hard to begin with, but getting really creative around how we move on. So for some people it might be music. We might play a certain song when it's nearly time to start packing up, or we might have a smell. We might turn some oils on or something, or we might have non-verbal cues, if this is making sense. But definitely the warning escalates the anxiety and makes it harder to move beyond the transition. I really struggle with letting the demands go when we need to get out of the house for work and school. Any suggestions? We have early risers, but even with 2 hours up our sleeve, we don't make it out of the house when we need to. I don't have any suggestions for that, Sarah. I mean, I'm not in the habit of giving suggestions around how to assist our children to be compliant with our own needs, because I know that that can be extremely painful for them. What I'm more comfortable with is speaking about how we can challenge ourselves as adults to be creative and look outside the box for solutions rather than giving the responsibility to our children. My question around this would be, are they school avoiding? Is it about school avoidance? And if it is, are we looking at that and are we asking the questions around why they're school avoiding? Do they have high anxiety around that? Is there an IEP in place? I think sometimes for our PDAers that may not even matter. Yeah, that's really tricky. Can we bring people into the house to be with our children so that we can work? Can we work from home? Can we speak to our employers about our position being remote? Can we have flexible working hours? Can we speak to the school about our children having flexible schooling hours? Those are just some questions that I would begin with. Can you talk about late toileting as demand refusal? Yes. Interception. Interoception is one of the sensory systems, and it relates to the indicators that we feel internally, like hunger, needing to use the bathroom, being thirsty, those sorts of things. Those are demands for a PDAer. So if I'm sitting at my desk and I'm working away and I'm quite happy and I feel the urge to go to the bathroom, I feel angry. It's a demand. I feel annoyed. And I'm not always conscious of that. I've had to notice that plenty of times to be aware of it. So if I have the feeling come up that I'm hungry and I need to eat, I feel annoyed by it. I feel inconvenienced by it because it's a demand. So even the body's cues are demands for us. So a lot of PDAers will hang on and hang on and hang on and hang on and not go to the toilet until we're in pain. Many children will have toileting accidents. Many of our children will still be wearing pull-ups to bed at night. That's quite common. But also, if our children experience prolonged chronic anxiety, or they're experiencing school avoidance, then there may be changes in their toileting and their eating and their sleeping. And this is really important to pay attention to because this can often indicate the beginnings of trauma. So keeping an eye on any changes in their toileting is really important. Sometimes we can give our children reminders. Sometimes we can say, do you need to use the loo? Do you need to go to the toilet? That's a double demand. It can be really tricky. So sometimes just making sure that we buy underwear for our little people that might be preventative measures if they do have accidents, or, helping them with things like that. But yes, using the toilet is definitely a demand. Definitely. Aside from our interoception being another set of demands, the act of toileting itself is a social and cultural norm, which also presents expectations, and for little PDAs definitely can be a demand. Sonia, I feel like that too sometimes. I'm struggling. I don't want to parent. I just don't want to do anything. Yeah, I feel that too. I really feel that. And when I have days like that or moments like that, I allow myself to not do anything. Those are the days where we let go, totally let go. Let the kids stay in their pajamas. Do whatever we have to do to get through it. There are days we thrive and days we survive, and then there are days with everything in between. Life doesn't have to be great all the time. It doesn't have to be perfect, and we don't have to be perfect people. Parenting is bloody hard. Parenting is hard. It's so hard. Our new world, unschooling, safe foods always available, access to foods that help with sensory, only mentioning it's good to look after your teeth, and it's good to also eat fruit and veggies since they have good nutrients in them. Allowed all access to electronics, all unplanned days, very minimal planned meetups, haven't for almost a year, has been so nice. I only work 2 days a week. Also, VR, virtual reality, is so fun. VR is amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. And Rebecca, kudos to you. That's really, really great if that's what's working for you. My son often doesn't like things in the world. Yeah, this is really common for PDAers. words, sounds, images, phrases, and he'll need to voice his dislike as a ritual over and over again, like OCD reassurance, or maybe even Tourette's. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on overlap with this and PDA as another way to preserve his autonomy from these things he doesn't like. I find it challenging to know how to support him. It is really, really common. I know I say this a lot, but it's really common for PDAers to move into, to have such a deep need or a deep-seated need for safety that we can tip over into OCD, or, you know, we can have a lot of intrusive thoughts that come from anxiety, and there's a bit of a cyclical nature there. So the anxiety feeds the intrusive thoughts feed the anxiety. And so we may begin with rituals, which is what you're talking about here, voicing his dislike as a ritual over and over again, like OCD reassurance, or maybe even Tourette's. Yes, this is really common. And it is really challenging to know how to support our children, because I think that these are things that are really important to pay attention to. And if we have a trusted medical professional, it is definitely worth mentioning, because sometimes, and I am not a medical professional or a trauma-informed therapist, I want to make that really, really clear, but I always do think it's worth checking in with our trusted professionals around any concerns that we have, such as OCD-like behaviours, because it may be that sometimes the anxiety could be assisted with medical intervention and maybe not. But there's no shame in seeking help from our trusted professionals, for sure. But to answer the question, yes, this is very, very common. It is very common for highly anxious people to tip over into OCD behaviours and intrusive thoughts, particularly PDAers. That is a sign of extreme anxiety. What completes the framed wording? I am not weird, I am limited edition, Elizabeth. Well, I've been talking for over an hour, and I'd love to keep talking. I'm really relaxed and enjoying connecting with everyone, but I should probably go and do some work. Oh. Hello, Fairly Aughty. How are you? Yeah. My child would just roll their eyes at me. That's how I've always been with them. Oh, you do? Okay, Melissa has multiples of the soccer tops until he changes teams, and they cost a bomb as they have to be the authentic ones. Oh, are they teams that he's supporting, Melissa? Oh, that is hard. That's really hard. I wonder if you could... Oh, no, probably not. I was just going to say, I wonder if you could turn it into a cool bonding time art and craft activity where you buy your own t-shirts and make your own team supporting t-shirts with fabric pens, but nothing beats the real thing, does it? Hello, Sarah. So how do we tell if late toileting is low interception sensitivity or demand avoidance? Yeah, I don't think it matters, to be honest, because the interception is the demand. So the way that we would often work with PDAers would be the same anyway in supporting them. So whether it's low interception sensitivity or demand avoidance, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I wonder if maybe having a sensory profile carried out would be useful. I always recommend that to people. Seeing an OT to have a sensory profile done, which gives a really good indication of our areas of sensory sensitivity or sensory defensiveness, and you can be both, sensory aversiveness. And of course, the sensory profile changes over time. But yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of times where we won't know whether it's A or whether it's B. And so being creative and finding solutions that won't matter what it's driven by, but will still address or support or accommodate the person is the way to go. Hi, Alison. Oh, Summer. Hello. Yes, same. Using the loo, I leave it to the point where I'm in pain. I literally rush to the back door. I bang on the door furiously, and everyone knows what it means, and they rip the door open, and I say, "Don't talk to me, I've got to go to the toilet." Every single time, and I'm 43 this month. Been doing this for 43 years. Demand avoidant people? Maybe. Okay, I'm going to stop myself because I won't leave. Oh, hi, Pam. It's so lovely to see you. Elizabeth, hi. Oh, I'm about to leave. I've been talking for over an hour. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. Oh, let's do some sound effects first. Oh, I pressed it the second time, but it didn't work. Glockenspiels. Party noises. Party. Party, everybody. Triangle. Does anybody remember when we used to play percussion instruments? Is that what they were called? Yeah. You could choose whatever instrument you wanted. I would always go for the triangle. So simple. Stand in the corner every few lines of the song. Ding. But also really important, you can always hear the person playing the triangle. Like, it's there. You can hear it. Listen to the song. You can hear the triangle. It's a little instrument with big impact. Clackers. Yeah, I liked the clackers, but not as much as the triangle. Okay, everyone, I'm really going now. I'm really, really, really going. Bye.